Hello, I'm Rob Doherty and this is the FSTVS podcast, Executive Edition, supported by Liberry Consulting and hosted by Julian Scott, animation consultant for Film London. In this series we'll be chatting to the big hitters in the animation industry and discovering a little bit more about what they do, how they got there, their thoughts on the animation industry, and, I hope, get to meet the person behind that executive title. Today's FSTVS guest of us with Julian Scott is Andrew Baker, CEO of Cantilever Media, the production company behind one of the most successful independent animated features of recent years. Julian talks to Andrew about Maurice's success, as well as his unexpected route into animation in the first place. We'll dig a little bit into how Andrew acquires the rights for his projects and then goes about funding and producing them, and maybe end with a little bit of advice from someone well positioned to give some. It's a hard start on this episode, so get ready, and here we go with Julian Scott talking to Andrew Baker.
You didn't start out as an animation producer, did you? Where did it all begin?
I think it's safe to say that becoming an animation producer was one of the most unlikely career paths I could have chosen. So I grew up in a little place in Yorkshire called Wakefield. And if anybody knows Wakefield, it's just outside of Leeds. It is not what I would call a media hub. It's so unmedia that the BFI a few years ago designated it as one of their hotspots where they were trying to encourage people into the media industry and actually give them money to do it. So safe to say that as I was growing up, animation was definitely not on my agenda. I actually started off, I actually qualified as a solicitor. So I was a lawyer, a big law firm, but very much focused on IP. So for me, that was an area that I found really interesting. I've got a science background. All my kind of A-levels and things were science and maths. And at one point, I was going to write software. That was something I was really keen on. And it was actually my A-level maths teacher who said, "Oh, have you ever thought about the law?" And I read into it and I got really fascinated by the whole IP side of things, and it fitted with my interest in software and coding and games. And so when I qualified as a solicitor, that was the department I went into, which was IP. And it just so happens that when I was there, because I was the junior person in the team, I got given all the stuff that nobody else wanted to do. And so I started picking up bits of television work. And I ended up, one of my first jobs, funnily enough, was working for Channel 5 when they first launched. So they had thousands of contracts they needed doing to buy all the content to launch the channel. And they didn't have enough staff. So I got seconded to Channel 5. And I kind of walk in my corporate legal suit, tie and looking very smart. And I noticed that all the lawyers at Channel 5 had televisions in their room, which for a start, that was fantastic. What a great idea.
Brilliant.
But also they seemed to be really enjoying themselves, which, isn't necessarily the case when you're in a sweatshop of a law firm. But that kind of piqued my interest. And then a few months later, a friend of mine in Manchester had been at the same law firm, had been on secondment to Granada TV. He and I got chatting, and he was quite honestly bragging. He was telling me what a great place it was to work, and how I should get out of the law firm and, do something really fun and interesting. And I got really frustrated with him. He was being so smug. And I said, "Well, get me a bloody job then, if it's that good." And 4 weeks later, he phoned me up and he said, "Someone has just resigned. I've spoken to my boss. You've got an interview tomorrow." And luckily, the partner I was working for was off fishing, as they did. And so I kind of came into work in Leeds, went across to Manchester, did my interview, came back, and lo and behold, I got the job. And so I started at Granada Television in the kids department, working with an amazing guy called Stephen Andrew, who was just newly recruited from the BBC to run Granada Kids. And at that point, we were doing children's ward and lots of other great things. And one of my first jobs was to sort out all the paperwork and deals for the Sooty show. And so one of the first things that I always say to people is, I was Sooty's lawyer. Don't mess with the bear. And as Granada grew, it incorporated Yorkshire Kids, Yorkshire TV, and so I was looking after all the things there. And then eventually, it included Cosgrove Hall Films. And as a kid, the one show that really made the most impression on me, and I'm sure we all have one from being kids, but for me, it was Danger Mouse. Danger Mouse was just everything that I loved about entertainment and about film and animation. And lo and behold, here I was walking into Cosgrove Hall, the home of Danger Mouse. And that was a real moment for me. That was like, wow, I've finally arrived somewhere where I feel I have a spiritual home. And I got on really well with the people running Cosgrove. There was a MD called Ian Pelling who was there, who I ended up being friends with for years and years and years and years. And I really loved that whole side of the business. And then as my career developed, I started doing lots of other things at ITV. I went to Los Angeles to run the legal function in LA. I ended up at Network Center doing commissioning. Stephen Andrew had become a commissioner. And so he asked if I would come and do all the legal work. And so I was doing broadcast deals for animation and for kids programs. And then I set up my own consulting firm, decided I would do business fairs for all those indies out there. And of course, it would all be kids programs because there were so many. I was dealing with them every day. And that didn't quite work out. And
why didn't it work out?
Because in the grand scheme of things, there are actually so few kids programs that were being made compared to documentaries, to drama. And so as a freelance business fairs person, I ended up spending probably 4 years doing documentaries before my first kids show arrived. And at that point, I've got one at last. I can do kids programs. But I was doing a lot of drama, as I said, a lot of documentary work. And then eventually I got to the point where there was an opportunity to sell that business, which I did. And it gave me the chance to do a bit of a reset and to kind of pick and choose what I wanted to do next. Partly because I was forbidden to do legal work for a year. So my non-compete clause was like, well, you can't go back out into the market. So I either spend a year at home doing the gardening or do something completely different.
And was that your eureka moment where you thought, actually, this is an opportunity for me to become an animation producer?
No, not even animation producer at that stage. It was more a case of, as I'd been working with lots of production companies, and I do mean a lot. I mean, I worked with over 400 production companies when I was running my consultancy. I had 15 lawyers working for me. And so rather than doing writers' deals or paperwork and things, I was actually at a point where I was doing a lot of strategic work. I was a non-exec director for a number of companies. And a lot of what I was talking about was, well, how do we finance this show? How do we structure a co-production? How do we raise the money so that we can make these programs in the first place? So it wasn't the creative side at all. I was very much on the kind of commercial director, EP kind of role. And when I had this moment where I could choose what I wanted to do, what I felt was an opportunity was to set up a kids production company to make animation. And so I wasn't going to produce per se, but I had a real clear sense based on all the things I've done that there was an opportunity in the market to structure something in a particular way, to take advantage of SEIS funds, for example, and to be able to develop some projects and take them to market. And what I definitely wasn't was a creative. So I wasn't writing, I wasn't drawing, that wasn't my skill set. But I had a deep passion for animation, and I loved. I'm a voracious reader, so I've been reading, usually a lot of sci-fi, to be fair, but sci-fi and fantasy and things. And so while I wasn't someone who would write, I had a real sense of story and characters and that sort of thing. But enough to know that I wasn't the person who was going to write things and wasn't going to be the person driving the creative. So I teamed up with someone who I'd worked with previously, who was a very creative guy. He had produced various things. He was a director. He was a writer. And we set up the company together. And he had lots of ideas for making particular shows, so particular ideas that he'd created. I had lots of ideas for how to raise the money. And so we came together and we launched a Kids Cave, and all of the things that I wanted to do, we did. So we raised money. We then had a pot of development. We could then develop shows to the level where we could pitch them with a really high degree of confidence, because we had money to pay for writers, designers, trailers. We had the full package. And because I knew how to structure deals and co-productions, I knew that if someone liked the show, I could finance it. We could make it work. And lo and behold, we did. So we developed a show called RoboZuna, which my business partner had for many years in various incarnations. But the injection of cash allowed us to really refine it and really kind of make it work. And it was just perfect timing. We pitched it and we ended up with an ITV Netflix co-commission. We originally were commissioned for 20 half hours, and I managed to negotiate them up to 40 half hours. Because, hey, it's economies of scale. We can make them more cheaply, guys, if you just give us double the budget. And you know what? That worked really well. But also at that point, I realized that series animation is a hard business. I mean, it's really, really difficult.
Yeah.
I then had an opportunity to look at other things that were happening, and I was actually producing producing and EPing, working with another company doing documentary features. And I realized that here was a business model that was so similar in so many different ways to making animation in terms of how the financing is pulled together. But actually it didn't rely on broadcasters. And so obviously one of the problems for series is you're relying on a broadcaster having a slot, not having something similar, and if all the stars are aligning at the same time. And actually for film, it felt like there was more opportunity, but I wasn't sure if it was really there. I wasn't sure if it was a genuine opportunity. And so I decided I wanted to do that. And my business partner and I agreed that he would buy me out. He would carry on doing what he was doing. I would carry on doing films. And it was just at that moment when I was producing lots of documentary features that the Amazing Maurice arrived.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because, and don't take this the wrong way, we've known each other a long time, so you'll know this is meant with love.
With love, yes.
With love. But at the time, you were, effectively a relatively unknown animation producer, production company, and you got the rights to a Terry Pratchett novel. You got a US signature writer, and you got the most phenomenal cast. How?
I was going to say my winning smile, but those who know me perhaps would laugh at that. As you did, thank you for that.
Sorry.
You're supposed to get yes, Andrew. Absolutely.
Yes, no, it is exactly. It's your winning smile every time.
I would even state it even worse than you did. I would say not only was I relatively unknown, I was completely unknown. Not even on the radar. Just someone who had the wish to make something. And at the beginning, I was saying, look, there's no way you could have planned this. And exactly this is what happened on The Amazing Maurice. So I did not option the book.
Okay.
So the book was optioned by Emily at Ulysses Films in Germany through a random series of coincidences in a moment where the Pratchett estate was allowing options. And that has never happened before or since. It was literally a 1 in a million chance that she was at the right place at the right time with the right conversations to get the option on The Amazing Maurice. The writer that you alluded to, Terry Rossio, wrote Shrek and Aladdin. Now, that's quite a decent writer, really. I mean, as these things go. How did she get him? Again, random series of coincidences. He was supposed to be writing something else with the Pratchett estate. And he had worked with Terry originally, so he knew him, he knew books, he knew the characters, and he was going to write another IP. And at the last minute, something happened where he couldn't write it. And so almost as a consolation prize, they said, well, what about writing on The Amazing Maurice? And he went, oh, I love that book. Yeah, let's do that. And so when Emily was developing it, he was already attached. He came prepackaged, which was amazing. And he delivered an amazing screenplay. But Emily then got a bit stuck. She was going, okay, the reason she likes the story was that it's based on the Pied Piper, and she's from Germany, and it's a folk tale that they know. And therefore she was going, oh, this works really well as a German film. But she really felt that she needed someone who knew Pratchett and was a UK producer, so native English speaker. And they were stuck on the designs. They tried lots of people to create some artwork, and really nothing was landing. It was probably quite interesting to actually look at some of that early artwork. It's in the Art of book, available in bookshops. But honestly, if you look at the Art of book, some of those early explorations of designs are they're really interesting, but they're not right for the characters. They just didn't quite land. And so, random series of coincidences. So Emily was at a film festival in Canada on a table waiting for dinner. You know how there's big tables where everyone waiting to get to bed? And their table was the last to be served. And so what do? You talk to the person next to you. And she turns to the person next to her and says, so what do you do? And he says, what do you do? And she said, well, I'm a German film producer for animation, and we're developing a Terry Pratchett story. And we're actually looking for a co-producer, ideally someone in the UK. And it turns out the person she was talking to was a friend of mine. And the first thing he said is, I know exactly who you should speak to. You should speak to Baker. And he called me up and he said, Andrew, I've got this lady I'm talking to. She's got a Terry Pratt. And I went, yes. That was it. She finished the word, Terry Pratt. And I went, yes. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what book it was. I just went, I love Terry Pratchett.
But did you, you loved it personally, but did you also at the time see the commercial potential in a Terry Pratchett?
No, because at that point I didn't know which book it was. I didn't know what we were going to do. Is it a series? Is it a feature? And Terry Pratchett is a two-edged sword commercially. Although you might say, oh, but it's a slam dunk, Andrew. It's a Terry Pratchett novel. One of the really interesting things is that Terry Pratchett, for you and me, perhaps, is someone we go, well, we know who he is. He's an incredibly successful author. He's sold over 100 million books worldwide. He's a genius. This is amazing. But when it comes to audiences, there are more people out there who have never heard of him than have read his books. Because one of the interesting things about Pratchett is that he sells more of his back catalogue than most other authors. And what that means is if you're a Pratchett fan, you tend to read all of his books. And so rather than people going, well, there's 100 million people who know his books, actually, that's not the case. There's 100 million people who are out there who have bought books. But when you start narrowing it down, it might be 2/3 of that number or even 1/3 of that number who are just mega fans. They just, he's written so many books, 40 odd books. And the chances are that most fans have read all of them.
Got it.
And so it's a neat, but also there is a perception. And actually, it's really interesting when you drill into Terry's life. He's always had this issue. There's a perception that it's a bit strange and a bit niche and a bit kind of, not something that's mainstream. And in his early days, he was very much written off as being, oh, well, it's just fantasy. It's not real books. Even to the extent where on the top 10 list of books being sold, even though he was at number 1, they wouldn't put him on the list. The bookshops refused to put him on the list originally because they didn't feel he was a real author.
That sort of smacks of snobbery slightly, if you ask me.
Oh God! Honestly, there's a really, really great book all about his life that was written by Rob Wilkins, who is his friend and PA for many years. And honestly, I would definitely recommend reading it. A Life with Footnotes. It's great. At all good bookshops. But so Terry Pratchett wasn't a slam dunk. It was very much for me as a fan. It was like, well, I know the stories. I'd love to read this. The script came in and I read it, and I kind of read very quickly. So I read it very, very quickly and then read it again, and then immediately downloaded the book on my Kindle to read the book again. Because it'd been years since I'd read The Amazing Maurice. And what really stood out for me is that first draft really captured the characters. It felt authentic. It felt like he'd really nailed the story. And so, long story short, Emily and I agreed to co-produce this, and Roddy and I looked at, well, what could we do in terms of designs? And we ended up, we approached an amazing designer called Carter Goodrich. And Carter is an American, but he's done lots of Disney movies. He did Ratatouille. He's done Brave, Cloudy with Meatballs. I mean, just the list goes on and on. And he sent us some character designs, and we just went, yes, those are our characters. They are amazing. And then it was a question of trying to raise the finance, and that was a long journey. It was kind of, it was basically 7 years to develop, raise the finance, and produce the film. And so part of that was bringing together the right people. So we had Terry Rossio, we had Carter Goodrich, we had a great director in Toby Genkel, but he wasn't a famous director. He was just a really good director. Now he's famous. He's doing the new Beatles movie. I mean, it's amazing. But the really interesting thing is that what we got as feedback was either, I love Terry Pratchett, I want to do this film with you, or I've never heard of Terry Pratchett, but what an amazing screenplay and what great designs. And so we had it both ways. Yeah. Either you knew about Pratchett and you wanted to do it, or you didn't know, but you really loved the story and the characters, because Terry came up with these amazing characters that were just so unique and different. It just really worked as a story. And so by the time we raised all the finance, and in the UK, our biggest partner was Sky. And I mean, talk about unknown. I emailed a cold email to the then commissioner for Sky Cinema, Ian. And literally the header was Terry Pratchett animated feature. And he'd never heard of me. He'd never spoken to me before. Somehow it got into his inbox, and he emailed back and he went, yeah, let's have a meeting.
Wow. Simple as that.
Simple as that. And he read the screenplay and he said, I love it. What a great story. And what was really good is we had lots of meetings at Sky as we developed it and moved forward. But I was leaving a meeting with Sky, and they hadn't committed at this stage, and we weren't sure if they were going to or not. And they'd had someone in who was like a management trainee, rotating through different departments, doing their different skills, learning the business. And he had said, look, I'm a Pratchett fan. And as we were walking out the office to the exit, I was saying, oh, that's really great. I hope you enjoyed the script. And he said, do you know what? We've all agreed it's one of the best things we've ever read.
Wow.
And for me, leaving Sky, not knowing if I had a commission yet, for someone to be telling me that they all agreed it was a great script was a real shot in the arm. It was like, great, we need to keep going. We need to keep developing. And then eventually Sky committed and we were in production, but it was COVID times. So we literally greenlit in lockdown. And part of the reason our budget wasn't as high as we wanted is that we went, well, we don't know what's happening with the world. We've got a certain amount of money. It's not where we want it to be. But if we don't go now, we might never make this. So we just went, right, let's do it. Let's just go for it. And so part of that enthusiasm and kind of drive to make it work carried on to then looking at casting. And for casting, we had huge ambitions. We wanted to go for the big names, and we didn't have a big budget. And so how do we manage to make that work? I guess by having a great pitch, great script, and genuinely, the Terry Pratchett name then really worked because we were talking to English cast. And honestly, it was so funny. We were negotiating with Emilia Clarke's agent, and we really didn't think the agent was going to let us even get anywhere near her, because we were talking numbers and we were so far apart. It was just ridiculous. And Sky had already said, look, you can't afford her. Move on, find somebody else. And I was, no. I really want Emilia Clarke for this role. She's our first choice. She would just be perfect. And we went back to the agent and said, look, will you please, this is all we can afford. I promise you, we can't, there's no more money in the budget. Please, will you just share this with Emilia? And he went, all right, but she's not going to say yes because it's not enough money. Anyway, he comes back and goes, she said yes.
Huh.
When we actually spoke to her, it turns out that Amelia grew up reading Terry Pratchett. Her brother is a huge, huge fan. And she said to us, we did a little interview with her after we'd done the film as part of the EPK. And she was saying, of all the things she's ever done, this is the one that her brother got most excited about. And that's the reason why she was so enthusiastic, is because for her, there was a personal connection to Terry Pratchett. She loved the stories. She loved him as an author. And that really, really, really made a difference. For a lot of our cast, the Terry Pratchett name really worked. And as a similar thing, we're working on a series at the moment, a 2D animated series based on a Spike Milligan story of Bad Jelly the Witch. We have the same response. We are talking to comedians to do voiceovers, and they're saying, Spike Milligan? Yeah, I'll do a little cameo role. I'll do that character. It's not a lot of money, but it's Spike Milligan. I want to be part of it. I want to support it. And so sometimes having the right IP makes up for the fact that as a producer, nobody knew who the hell I was. And neither should they. I was genuinely not someone that they should have thought about and talked to. So yeah, lots of random coincidences that really just came together to make it an amazing film. And of course, the people who worked on it were just phenomenal. And I genuinely mean that all the way through animation, even the sound guys in London. I mean, everyone who worked on it went above and beyond. And I think that's partly why it's so good. Because despite the fact our budget was so small, it feels like a film that's 3 times the budget, because people really gave some heart and soul into it. And, you can see it on screen.
This podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the awesome Liberi Consulting. Liberi offers specially tailored industry-related training courses. Check them out at libericonsulting.com. That's LIBERI consulting.com. You can also find links to their fantastic courses on the Festivus website.
You're talking about budgets there, and we obviously have recently had the announcement in the last budget about the UK Indie Feature Fund, which if people out there in podcast land don't know what that is, it's the new audiovisual expenditure credit, or AVEC, for independent. It always sounds like something like an EVAC. It's like you've got to get out.
Exactly.
It's not, you've got to get in. That's what it's about. So if you've got a film of under 15 million, there's a gross tax credit of 53%, which everybody thinks that's probably going to net out to a tax credit of around 40%.
Yes.
Do you think that's going to encourage more animated features? Because it's the first time, I think, that animated features have actually been included in a feature film tax credit.
Yeah, so I'll just answer the last bit first. So animation features have always been able to claim as either animation or as a feature film. So it has always been part of it, but it's never something that's been highlighted. And part of the reason it's never been highlighted previously is that the UK just didn't really do much. It wasn't an industry where the revenue was going, we must include animated features, because apart from Aardman, there really wasn't much happening other than lots and lots of service work. So we've always had skills. We've always had people coming and working with our animation studios, but we've not necessarily been in a position where we could originate or co-produce, because there just wasn't the money in the UK. And so when the animation AVEC, because they changed that previously, when that came out, originally the language in it said animated series, and Animation UK campaigned successfully for the Treasury to add and animated film to the legislation. And so before this most recent iteration with the independent film tax credit, there was already an increase for the UK for animated feature films as part of the animation tax credit. And then the new ones come out, and we absolutely can qualify for that one. And the simple answer is yes, absolutely. The more money we can raise, the better the UK can compete with other countries to be part of animation co-productions, to originate shows and produce them. And I think one of the really important things is we're actually talking about animated features now in the UK. And if you go back a few years, we really weren't talking about it. There was, Aardman, as I said, doing their amazing films, but the rest of the UK, we didn't make anything. We just didn't do it because there was no way of raising the money to actually allow you to produce the film. Now, not only are we talking about it, but the government is now supporting us in that by actually saying, we're going to give you more money. And so I can tell you, going out to markets, talking to people internationally, there is a really strong message that the UK is doing stuff now. We really are motoring, and we've got lots of people now developing animation and trying to co-produce animation in terms of features. Whereas, as I said, you go back a few years and there was almost nobody. And so the increase in the tax credit, it's not going to suddenly mean that we're going to make loads and loads of films. Of course not. But that extra 5% or whatever it ends up being is often the difference between making something or not. And having that gives everybody confidence. It makes people think about the UK as a partner. And so, yes, I mean, obviously we'll wait for the data to come in, but my expectation on this is that it will make a significant difference to our ability to co-produce and to be able to produce feature animation in the UK. And so it will have a really, really positive impact.
Fantastic. Well, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Excuse me. I mean, just looking at the projects that and you don't have to name them specifically because I know sort of what's in development can be confidential. With what's perceived as the downturn in sort of commissioning for kids and animated TV series, has things? I mean, your success with Maurice. And you mentioned that you are developing a Spike Milligan series. Is that
actually in production on that. Actually in production. So
we're actually in production. Okay.
Yeah, we did it this year.
But has all that affected, with the tax credit and everything else, has that affected how you select projects going forward? Are you more likely, with the success of Maurice, to veer towards features rather than series?
Yes, very much so. So although we are producing a series at the moment and we have another series that we are trying to raise the rest of the finance for at the moment, my focus is very much features and feature animation in particular. And there's a number of reasons for that. Some of it is creative and just personal. I like animated features. It's a great process. It's telling one story over 90 minutes rather than 52 11-minute stories is a very different experience. And it really appeals to me the way that everything is kind of structured. The funding model is very, very similar in terms of it's a jigsaw of bits and pieces and co-productions and those kind of things. But yes, my personal opinion, and that's because of my background and because of my connections in the industry, it's much easier for me to go out to market and raise money for a feature film than it is for me to go out to market and pitch an animated series, because of exactly the reasons that we talked about for Maurice. I'm not somebody that the broadcasters know as a series animation producer. I've not, worked in lots of different animation companies. I've not, been a creator of a show. I'm kind of, someone who puts the jigsaw pieces together. But everyone in animation in series is going, we want to create a driven show. And of course everyone does. They want the story to be at the heart of it. And so that's not where I sit. I don't write things. I don't draw things. Yes, I have a lot of creative input to the movies I'm making, but I'm one of several producers doing that. And my input is partly story, but partly commercial. It's saying, well, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Is this going to work for this particular market? And so for me, there's a different opportunity in film, which is because of Maurice. People go, well, you've made a film already. And the classic Richard Curtis quote of, in order to make a film, you need to have made a film. It's true. When you've made a film, suddenly there are doors open to you that weren't opened before. And for me right now, although I love doing the series work and there's some really lovely ideas that we're talking to people about at the moment, my heartland, if you will, is animated features. And that's that's really something I'm trying to push on. And so most of my slate at the moment, most of my development is feature animation. And we launched one at the Berlin Film Market in February, which is out for pre-sales, and we'll be doing hopefully more sales in Cannes. Trying to close the finance gap, trying to bring all that money together. But it's a great show called Bollywood. And so, as the name would suggest, it's dogs and India. So I'm moving away from cats. I'm into dogs now. So
it's moving through the animal kingdom little by little, piece by piece.
There is a theme, and I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of talking animals in my life these days. So yes, that's the way forward for me.
Good. Now, and just sort of running out of time now, but I mean, your career has. Excuse me, I've got a real frog in my. I've got a frog in my throat. There's an idea for a film.
There you go, you see, yeah, that's a great idea. I'll talk to you later about that idea.
Brilliant. Okay. Off there, we'll have a conversation. Your career has moved sort of laterally, or sort of expanded from that legal and commercial side of business to include creative. And you were just talking then about your input into scripts and things like that. I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions just to finish up. What was the best piece of creative advice you have ever been given?
I think for me, the most interesting bit of advice, which sounds really simple, but it's really important to keep thinking about it every time you're looking at a project, is to remember who your audience is. And I think sometimes you can see projects where the team have lost track of where their audience is, and it's about making something for themselves. And for the particular demographic I'm making movies for, which is mainstream commercial family audience, you have to always remember that means that you can't be too young and you can't be too old, and you need to have a bit of adult humor as well as child humor. And so remembering who your audience is the mantra. It's always got to come back to your audience. So for me, that was a really key point.
Okay. And what's the best piece of business advice that you have given somebody else, in your humble opinion?
I've repeated somebody else's business advice, which is, so I got given this advice when I first left ITV by Ian Pelling, who used to run Cosgrove. And he had already left Cosgrove at that stage. And I phoned him up and I said, Ian, I'm leaving ITV. I'm going to set up on my own. You've been doing this a while. What advice would you give me? And he gave me some advice, which I'll repeat in a second. And he said, be open to new things. And for me, I was going to set up and do kids programming business fairs. And he said, be open to new things. And what did I do? I ended up working in factual documentaries for 3 years with no kids shows. But it led me to other things, and it opened doors to other projects. And it was one of those things where actually sometimes you have to be fixed on a goal and go, I'm going to do this, this, this. But sometimes you have to see what the universe sends to you and to go, you know what, I'm going to be open to possibilities. And so for anyone, I would say, be open to those possibilities. You never know where things are going to lead. I did not set off in life to be an animation producer. I guarantee you that much. And I could not honestly have planned anything that has happened. It has happened, and I've taken advantage of it, and I've maximized it, and I've lent into it. But it would never be something you could plan. And so for all the benefit in having a goal, equally be open to the possibility of the universe sending you something instead.
Very interesting. Thank you. And just finally, would you, if you could look back, the Andrew Baker of starting out in his career, what advice would you give young Andrew Baker as slightly more mature old Andrew Baker that you are now?
Slightly more grey-haired and haggard. Do you know what? When I was going through my different careers, I always had one thing in my mind, and I actually don't think I would change it. It was very much to say, I want to do something that I'm excited by, and I want to work with nice people. And that has led me to where I am today. And on the way, I've done some amazing things that I again, you couldn't have planned it. So, I was general counsel for the Bloodhound project, the UK's land speed record attempt. Now,
Wow.
was that something that I'd planned? Hell no. I did it for free. I volunteered for it. And I was doing big sponsorship deals, and we were talking to the MOD about exporting the Typhoon jet fighter engine out of the UK to South Africa to do a test. I mean, crazy stuff. But it was a really great team of people, and I really enjoyed it. And so I think what I've always done is follow those paths, and that has led me to animation and to features as well. And so I think that is always something that is a good piece of advice for people, is to follow those things through. And I guess I'm still doing it. I don't see this as being the end goal. I'm doing feature animation at the moment, and I'm really enjoying it. But I don't see this as a static thing. The industry's evolving. I'm evolving. And in 10 years' time, I actually have no idea what I'm going to be doing. But I'm really looking forward to it. Whatever it is, I'm really looking forward to it.
Excellent. It's actually a bit of a recurring theme. And in some of the other people I've spoken to on these podcasts, they have said the same thing about work on things that excite you, but most importantly, work with people that you like and you want to work with.
Absolutely.
And I think sort of based on that, quick yes or no answer, I suppose. Would you encourage somebody who's looking at animation as a career? Would you say go for it, or would you say not sure? Hang on a minute.
I would definitely say go for it. And there's a number of reasons for it. I could talk about the fact that, having worked in lots of different parts of the television and film business, animation people are really nice. That's always a good thing. Generally, I mean, not everyone, but generally as a rule, the animation industry is a lovely part of the business. People are genuinely passionate about what they do, and they're really nice people, and they're incredibly talented. But also from a pure, cold-headed, logical perspective, we're in a growth phase at the moment. The animation business is growing. And yes, there are issues with getting things commissioned on the television side at the moment, but definitely on the feature side, and as a worldwide thing, animation is going from strength to strength. I think more people are engaging with animation than have ever done so in the past. As a genre in the UK, it is the second highest grossing genre at the box office. So action movies and then animation. So it's incredibly successful. Now, yes, most of that is the big Hollywood movies, but they still need people to animate. And they tell stories in a really amazing way. And so I think there are huge, huge opportunities in the animation business at the moment for whatever people want to do, at whatever level they are now, or whatever level they would like to get to. I would say, absolutely, this is the place to be. It's a really exciting time.
Brilliant. Andrew, thank you so much for giving up some time to talk to me today. So what's next on the agenda? Top level media lunch, conference call with the stars, closing a deal?
All of the above. Or probably just going to get another cup of coffee. So,
brilliant. Well, listen, thanks again, Andrew. And thank you for listening.
What a fun chat. A big thank you to Andrew for a very entertaining and insightful conversation. Just goes to show that you can change course in your career whenever you want to. As always, a massive thanks to Julian Scott for hosting. Information about Film London can be found at filmlondon.org/animation. Well worth a visit. And once again, a huge thank you to Liberry Consulting for all their support in making this podcast series a reality. Check out their industry-related training courses on the FSTVS website now. Thanks everyone, and come back soon for more episodes.